On today's episode of Limitless Live, I had the privilege of sitting down with Seth Drugatz, who is a transformational coach in Greenville. And I've known Seth for 2 or 3 years now. And every time I sit down and have a conversation with Seth, it feels like my mind is opened. He has a fantastic way of just making through his use of words and exploration, helping open my eyes and others' eyes to what may truly be holding you back in terms of some preconceived notions, some limiting beliefs, some things that you've carried with you for a long time. And so I love getting to talk to Seth, and I'm really excited to share this conversation with Seth with you guys today. So here it is. I'm excited to be joined by Seth Drugatz today. I've known Seth for a couple of years now, and we met through some networking stuff, and I've gotten to know Seth even better through some one-on-one meetings that we've had, and the fact that Seth is a member of our gym here at Limitless Fit, so he comes and works out with us a couple times a week. But I invited Seth on because I never leave a conversation with Seth without learning something, so it's just a great opportunity for us to discuss a few things. So Seth, thanks for joining me today, man.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, really appreciate you inviting me here. This is my first recording in a podcast booth.
Cool.
So
right on. Well,
experience.
First of many, I'm sure I have a feeling you'll be a repeat guest here too. So, Seth, what I wanted to start with is just this idea of explaining a little bit more about what you do. There are so many different forms of business coaching, health coaching, mindset coaching, performance coaching. So when somebody uses the term coach, a lot of people maybe have some preconceived ideas of what that is. So why don't you start by just describing, as if I've never heard it before, describe a little bit more about what you do as a coach and kind of your approach and methods.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. My style of coaching, I call it transformational coaching, but the official name is ontological coaching. So it's the study of who we're being is kind of the underlying piece. And so the basic idea is that we're born into the world when we're little, and we're kind of just showing up very rawly as ourselves. We don't really have any conception about who we're supposed to be at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We're running into walls, doing whatever tiny toddlers do, being ourselves. And then we start to get feedback from the world about who we're supposed to be. Our dad might be like, oh, you need to do really well in school. Your teacher might tell you something like, hey, we really need you to not take as much space up in the room, like dial yourself back.
Yep.
And so you get this feedback from the world about who you're supposed to be. And when you're that age, you don't really know that everyone's human and they're just trying to do their thing. These are like big authority figures who are your main sources of love, safety, everything you're looking for when you're a kid, telling you that you need to show up this way. And so when you're that little, you tend to make decisions about it, where it's like, oh, I do need to do better in school. And, oh, my teacher's telling me I really do need to back myself off. I need to close myself off a little bit so I'm not distracting the classroom, whatever. Could be anything.
Yeah, sure.
And so we get these patterns and we start to run them. And as we grow up, we get better and better at them, because it tends to be that if we follow them, it'll bring us a lot of safety. We won't get in trouble. We'll get along with people, and it'll also bring us a lot of success. Like maybe someone who kind of puts themselves second, puts other people first, and people love having that type of person around. So then you're invited to things, etc. The problem happens is when that stuff just becomes automatic and it's the only thing we know how to do. Like we kind of get locked into these ways of showing up and we practice them for our whole lives, kind of forgetting that we ever made a choice. It's more like, oh, this is who I am now. Like I always put other people first. And after we practice that for long enough, we stop being able to see it. And it's really just the automatic thing that we bring everywhere we go. And so someone who puts other people first, for example, if we use that one, maybe they want to step into a CEO role. Maybe they want to start a company. Maybe they want to become a CEO. And their whole life they've practiced when they're under pressure to let other people go first, to put themselves second, sacrifice themselves, put other people first. If you're a CEO and you have to make hard decisions about your company and the direction that you're headed, you can't always be, I mean, you would know this better than most people, but you can't always put other people first. And so that's kind of what I coach people is I help them figure out what are the unconscious patterns that I'm running? How have I learned to show up in the world and about who I am? And how is that stuff in the way of what I want to create in the world?
Mm.
Because it tends to be that whatever experience of life people aren't having that they would like to have, them and their patterns that they're running tend to be the thing that's actually in the way of creating that for them.
Mm. That makes total sense. So what you just said reminded me of a conversation that I had with our team last week, I think, where we were every month, just as a lot of other businesses do, we have a sales meeting where we talk about how we've performed as a company and of the opportunities that we had, how many of them did we capitalize on and all that. And we have, just like every other product or service, we have some common objections or limiting beliefs that people might walk in with that might be a reason that they would decide not to move forward for whatever reason. And sometimes they tell us what those are and sometimes they don't. And it's our job to kind of pull those out of them, right? But what I'm kind of circling around to is I asked each of our team members of all the common objections that we hear, which one do they personally struggle with handling the most? Like, which is the hardest for you to have a conversation with somebody else about?
Mm.
And then what we ultimately circle back around to talk about is the reason almost always, and this is my opinion, I promise this is not published science or anything like that, but what I've observed, the reason that people have a particular problem, whichever one they chose, is because it's something that they have a problem with within themselves, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, if it's hey, I have a hard time having a financial conversation with somebody because it's hard for me to try to help somebody spend their own money kind of thing. It's like, well, I get that, but I bet more than anything, one of the root reasons behind why that conversation is hard for you is that you have kind of a troubled relationship with money too, right?
Mm.
Or, hey, it's really hard for me to have a conversation with somebody when they say they don't really think they're that important, right? They have 3 kids to take care of and blah, 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 blah. And that's just a hard conversation for me to have. It's like, well, I bet that's a hard conversation for you to have because you probably feel the same way, right? You
Yeah.
probably don't value your own self. So it's really hard for me to tell you, Seth, you should value yourself more when I don't value myself, right?
Mm.
So all that to say, not to use that as an opportunity to preach, but more as an opportunity to say the power of being able to make some of those small changes in yourself can tangibly be felt both personally, professionally, relationally. It's not just oh, well, I walk out of there and I feel good. Like there can be some real tangible proof, some real tangible result that comes from your work.
Yeah, I love your example. We call that, you may have heard this too, the mirror effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
100%. Yep.
yeah, it tends to be that I'll find when I'm really annoyed by something that someone's doing, it tends to be that I have a hang up about that thing.
Yep.
In my family growing up, there was this thing about actually the example I used, taking up too much space or like seeking attention, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always demonize that when I saw it in my head. I wouldn't really overtly attack anybody, but I'm like, oh, look at that person. They're trying to really get so much attention. Like, oh, that's gross. You shouldn't be doing that. When if someone's like, if someone was attempting to appear generous or something like that,
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, that's totally fine. They just want to be seen as generous. That's such a normal thing. When really there's not much of a difference between the two. But since I have major hangups around how much space I can take up, that would really bother me.
I have a child that 100% is what you're talking about, where we, rightly or wrongly, we at least tried to get him to a point of self-awareness where sometimes we could just tell there was this angst, this unsettledness within him. And our house is a little different because we do have 5 kids at home, but we literally taught him to say, hey, sometimes it's okay to just say, can I have your attention for a second? Because we could tell there was just kind of this like uneasy energy where you can't even sit still in your chair and you're acting like you're hungry, but you're not really hungry. And you're going in the corner over there, but you're kind of sitting there with a mopey face. Like, I wish somebody would play with me kind of thing. And like, at some point you do have to learn like to express your own needs and not make it this, I don't want to have to be a, hey, so-and-so, you're being annoying. I wish you would just snap out of whatever this mood is that you're in, but just be able to say, hey, can I have your attention for a second? Like, I feel like we haven't gotten to talk all day. Okay. I'm happy to entertain that versus the negative way of, like you said, of when a negative label or something like that is put on that, then their tendency will likely be to try to dampen that or whatever, when in reality, some of those things are are really hard to hide because they're a part of like truly who we are, you know?
Yeah.
And inevitably that then there's this tension of just like, I'm trying to act like somebody I'm not, which I'm sure is something that you deal with all the
Mhm.
time, or trying to act like whoever my audience is expects me to be versus who I truly am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Seth, just talk to me about, folks that you have worked with or are working with. What do you feel like have been some of the coolest or most rewarding, like experiential change that they've achieved? Like, just talk me through maybe even just an example or a story or two of just the breakthrough that somebody may have had as a result of some of the coaching that you've done and what impact that's had for them.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about my longest standing client. Um, I obviously don't share a lot of details, but I can give you some
Right. Oh
generalities
yeah.
of what he's faced. Yeah, so when he first came to see me, he really had trouble taking up much space at all in the world. It was kind of like he always came second. He wasn't even really allowed to make a splash in a room. It was kind of like he's along for the ride, if
Yep.
you will. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's not allowed to really impact the world. Um, and so after how long have I worked with him now? I guess for like a year and a half, probably at this point. Um, we've really seen some changes in him being able to understand where that stuff is coming from,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like how he views himself, how he views the world, and to practice into different things, which includes taking up more space, speaking himself into space, setting boundaries. Um, at his work, he was able to kind of reset expectations with all of the people that he works with. Really revolutionizing his experience at work, because before he was just kind of along for the ride, and now he can actually state what he wants, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's echoed, like once you kind of shift one of these patterns, it sort of echoes everywhere. Like with his friends, he wasn't able to speak up that much, and now he's creating, making suggestions, kind of like taking things the direction he wants to go and impacting the world. And just seeing him be able to really like shed off all that weight and really start stepping into himself has been a beautiful thing.
Mm.
And it's been a blessing to work with him.
Yeah. So I love that example. Talk to me a little bit about what is maybe the interplay where one thing ends and another begins in terms of, I'm sure you are working with folks or have worked with folks that have sought out some type of professional counseling, like truly mental health, like psychotherapy type stuff versus the coaching that you do. How do you complement that? How do you draw the line between what is your coaching approach versus what needs to be more of a medical or therapeutic approach?
I love that question. Yeah, so I'll share how I hold it. Like there are gray lines in between a lot
Sure.
of the disciplines, and
Hmm.
so it's hard to define absolutely. Um, but the way I hold it is, I always start with therapy because that's sort of like maybe the foundation of it all. I see therapists as healers. It's kind of like when you go to a therapist when something is wrong and you can't really show up as yourself, like you're maybe something is wrong is the wrong phrase, but it's something like I can't operate as my full self. Like there's trauma or there's something from my history that's just really in my way, and I can't even show up as myself. Like I I struggle to step as myself into the world, and I need to heal.
Mm.
Um, that I hold that therapists are amazing in that realm, kind of like healing people, bringing them up to a place where they can actually even operate, kind of getting some structure within themselves. Then coaching I hold is maybe the step after that. Coaching is like I'm a whole and complete human, and I'm ready to move, but I something's in the way. I'm stuck. Like I want to create these things in the world, but either I'm in the way of myself or there's something in the way of what I want to create in the world. So I've actually worked with some people who are both in therapy and coaching simultaneously, and they work really well together like that, where one is sort of like getting the building blocks in place, and then the other one's coaching is when they're ready to really step out into what they want to create, and take on some different things. Um, the final piece I'll add, which sometimes people call this coaching, but I hold that consulting is the thing at the top.
Okay.
And consulting is, if you follow these ways of doing it, these steps, you will be able to get this thing and kind of plug it into your life or business. Like, there's something specific I want. I go to a consultant, they tell me the exact steps. I sort of plug that thing in, and then I have that thing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the difference between coaching and that is, coaching is much more like um, reflective, and that there is no right way. It's kind of like allowing the person to build their own version of that. So it maybe takes longer, but there's some real power in being able to get to the foundation of what's going on for them, so they can really build it for themselves and in the image that they see.
So then, what's the next layer in terms of? I would just love to know how do you communicate the demand of the individual to say, hey, I can I can give you ideas or I can show you some techniques or methods that can be helpful. But at the end of the day, I cannot do it for you, right? A lot of people walk into certain situations where they are frustrated or disillusioned and they want somebody else to fix it for them. So what is your approach and what are your conversations like around what role someone has to play in their own journey?
Mm, yeah, I see that that's almost everything. Um, you can take other people's versions and sort of imprint it on your own, but there's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect somewhere because it's not something that you created rawly from.
Right.
Alignment is the word that's really coming up for me. It's kind of like, if what you're creating in the world is really aligned with who you are all the way down, then there's a lot of power that comes with that in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what you can move, what you can create, because it's all coming from within. If you took like someone who was a rah-rah leader, like gets people laughing, clapping, something like that. If you took that system and put it onto someone who just doesn't exhibit those qualities at all, like they're not a rah-rah person, maybe they're more powerful and full of integrity and they move with purpose. Um, that they won't experience the same success with that other system. It's kind of like they really have to let themselves out in a way to really
Mm-hmm.
bring the full power to it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's similar conversation to what we have with potential or actual clients of ours is this idea that there has to be, we are the experts who are going to help show you the way. We're going to help you avoid some pitfalls. We're going to help try to accelerate the process to healing and recovery. But what will ultimately determine success or failure in this is your willingness to take ownership and follow that plan, right? Like a
Hmm.
plan is only as good as the person who is choosing to follow or not follow it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you run into some of that too. And then the next layer of that is a belief of, can I change? Or am I just a victim of my circumstances? Right.
Mm.
So talk to me about that in terms of the way that you navigate some of those things but the world is just crazy all around me. And I don't know how much of an impact I'm actually going to be able to have because there's all these other circumstances that are just weighing heavily on me.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, it's really easy to be at effect of the world. I mean, I still am sometimes. The way that we handle that in the coaching container is very much going after what the people want, what they want to create. Um, if it's something we're designing and it's aligned with what they want to create in the world, um, then they can kind of take full responsibility and step into it. They don't have to be at effect because it's something that they're just designing. Um, and so sometimes you're like, maybe you work in a business where you don't have fundamental control over all pieces of it. However, we still kind of set it up that way as we're working. It's like, how can you take full responsibility as a leader and sort of step into that in whatever space you're in to really create the experience that you want for
Mm-hmm.
yourself?
Yep. Are you familiar with a term called equipoise by chance?
No.
Okay, so it's something that I learned about during my residencies. This was 2014, 2015 timeframe for me, and it's one of the most powerful, like, confounding variables that we get in clinical research. So what equipoise is really just if we could measure whether or not somebody believes an intervention of any kind is going to work. So
Mm,
essentially, I could give you a million different drugs. and I can then assess the outcome of those various different drugs on whatever ailment that you might have had in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it is incredibly important for me to assess your equipoise as a potential confounding variable, where we know the power of the human mind to say, if I believe an outcome is going to happen, that outcome is most certainly measurably more likely to happen. Or the converse of that is also true. If I believe that an outcome will not happen, it is measurably more likely to not happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that is something that we, as a part of our process, try to assess, because we know it can be just as powerful as the intervention that we choose, or the dosage of that intervention, or the frequency of that intervention. And so actually, I'm going to use that as a launching point. I just wanted to share a message that we got last week from a client that had just come and seen us for the first time. And to me, it was the perfect embodiment of equipoise. And then I'm going to come back to you with a question afterwards. But she wrote this very simple phrase. She said, and this is her, a female, speaking about a male who is her therapist that's going to be working with her here at Limitless. She says, I believe that he believes that we can fix me. So I'm going to say it one more time, because there's a lot of I's, he's, and we's in here. But she says, I believe that he believes that we can fix me. In other words, she walked out of a session with one of our therapists believing that the therapist was confident that this process was going to work.
Yeah.
That she was going to get better. So it wasn't, I believe I'm going to get better. And it wasn't that my therapist believes I'm going to get better. It was, I believe that he believes that we can fix me. So then there was also that shared ownership piece that we were talking about, right? Of that, I believe that this is the right person to help me solve this problem, but I also know that based on the plan that we just discussed, it's going to take both of us in order for us to get there, right? So I didn't script that, but if I could frame that and put that on a wall somewhere as like the perfect outcome from a first appointment of course, I want somebody who comes to see us, particularly on the physical therapy side, I want them leaving, moving, and feeling better and excited about the process. But if I could script them saying anything, it would be that. And it's not just because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. It's because clinical research actually tells us that that is actually a more accurate predictor of whether or not she's going to get better than whether or not I can comb through the literature and choose the exact perfect interventions for the perfect patient, right? The fact that they believe that that plan or that process is going to work is extremely impactful. So having said all that, now that we're kind of using a similar term now of equipoise, tell me, like in your practice, in your experience, what does that look like in terms of, yeah, Seth, thanks for all this like frilly pie in the sky, like this very theoretical idea of what's going to happen, but like, how do I know this process is going to work at the end of the day? Like, how can I believe that I can actually overcome these mental blocks, these hurdles, these circumstances? How do you address some of that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think where to start. I guess the first thing I'll say is there's a certain amount of faith that sort of goes into it. It's kind of like you don't ever really know for sure, and a lot of it is on them to kind of take the things on and be able to move. So there is always that piece in there that's like it's a fair question mark, I guess, to have. The way that I handle it is I really take myself out of the equation. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. It's like, so we define what they want, what they would love to have in their life. As we define that, we then start to look at what's in the way between where they are and what they want, and what's the thing that's actually in the way. As we define that, it tends to become pretty clear that there's something in the way that they're doing, or like a relationship they have that's movable, like it's possible. And as long as I don't give them, well, I sometimes will give them like maybe suggestions, things to do, but for the most part, they're in the driver's seat the whole time. And I'm here to kind of reflect and show them so that they can build. When we do it that way, it's kind of like, it sort of comes back to, there's this thing I can move, I see it. Do I actually want to move it? Like, is this a big enough deal for me to actually go through and move this thing out of my way?
Right.
And I'll tell you, sometimes people choose out, and that can be tough as a coach to watch someone. I would loosely call it like choosing back into fear. Fear is super broad, but it's like whatever the payout is at the end isn't worth me taking on all this stuff. And so that can be tough to see sometimes, but I don't know. It's always people's choice, and in their journey, maybe they had to fail at taking it on this time to like build up the courage to go at it like a year later or somewhere down the road.
Yep. Urgency is a word that we use on our side too. Like sometimes there has to be this sense of urgency of I need to do something and I need to do something now, because if it's just a matter of, well, it might be nice if my life got a little bit better, then sometimes that's not enough to like nudge someone over the edge. And I don't want to, use a quote without attributing it correctly. So I'll just say someone wise also said, like, in order for me to make a change, the pain of me continuing on the path that I'm on has to be greater than the pain of me making a change, right? Like at some point I have to come to my wits end, so to speak, to say, I can no longer go down this path. And yes, change is hard. Yes, committing to doing something differently, having difficult conversations with people in my life, whatever that may be, that's going to be hard. But it's not going to be harder than what the end of this path looks like another 6 months or a year from now, right?
Yeah.
So again, I'll bring it back to you. How much of that do you maybe help? Because I think sometimes people, they have difficulty seeing the forest for the trees, right? Like they're just so in the moment that it's really hard for me. I'm sure you probably ask those questions of like, hey, if you do nothing, what's life going to be like a year from now, 5 years from now, whatever? Talk me through how you manage some of those conversations, though, from a standpoint of maybe somebody's just kind of like, I mean, yeah, maybe life kind of stinks, but I don't know if I'm ready to have that hard conversation with my spouse or my mom or my whatever. Okay. Well, what's life going to be like a year from now, 5 years from now, if you don't? Like, how do you manage some of that?
Yeah, it's very much like there's like a carrot and a stick. Like some people will move because they want to create something, others will move because the stick's coming for them. um, I tend to find that so we do a lot of visioning with people up front. Like, what would you really love your life to look like if nothing was in the way? Like, if you could almost wave a magic wand and suddenly your life was how you would love to have it. A lot of times doing that will implement a little bit of both the carrot and the stick, because it's like typically there is a way that they would love to have their life that's not really available to them for some reason. And as we start to look at it, a lot of times people keep that door shut because it's painful to look at possibility that you don't think you can access. It's kind of like, I could have this, except for I'm not choosing to do that. So I'm going to keep this door shut so I don't have the pain of having to look over there at this thing I could possibly have. So when we do visioning and we look at possibility with people, it really opens that up. And it's from a place of like, of good, I would assert. It's like, it is possible and we can create that if that's what they want to go have. Once they can see the possibility, it tends to be super exciting because there's an experience of life maybe they would love to have. And then there's also the like, but it's been going like this instead, and I'm frantic every day, or my stress levels are high, or whatever it is that they're experiencing that's less than desirable. And so once we have that defined, and they can see that like the way we work will take them, if not to that thing, then at least pretty close to it, like an experience of it. That tends to be pretty powerful because it's the stick of like, I don't want it to go the way it's been going this whole time. Like I'm fed up with that. And also there's all this good stuff on the other side. Why would I not step into this and go take it on?
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned at the beginning, then I think this is kind of circling back now. You talked about this visioning process and this idea of, I almost call it like playing in the sandbox, right? Like imagine there's no walls, there's no anything. You can make whatever you want. Some people, and by some people, I will include myself in this, have trouble with things like that because, circling back to something you said earlier, sometimes you feel like you're constantly trying to put yourself second or behind other people. My gut reaction to that question of like, what if you could just, blank slate, like build life however you want, it feels like 90% of what I would say is very selfish in nature, right? Of just like, I would rather these inconvenient things or these things that I choose to do for other people, I would rather not have to deal with any of those things and let me just do it my way. So your response then to like, of course we need to be able to have honest conversations about what are some of those hurdles that we could potentially overcome, but how do you overcome that mental hurdle of even starting, of going like, well, but whatever I say next is probably going to be really inherently selfish.
So you're saying, this is just a little bit of clarifying.
Yeah, yeah.
You're saying that if everything was as you loved it, there would be a little bit more selfishness on your side, like you putting yourself first a little bit more.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. Um, there's potential that would open up a lot for you, to put yourself first. Like we'd have to do some exploring there,
Sure.
but if I'm just imagining a hypothetical person, actually, it's not even hypothetical because I also suffer from putting other people first. Um, there's a lot of ways that I get bogged down where I'm either like shutting parts of me off or going second or not letting myself out. Where if I look at like the impact I want to have in the world, maybe it could be much larger if I'm being a little more selfish and kind of taking time for myself. So then I have the energy to go create what I really want to create. Um, yeah, it's a little tough to say without diving into it too much, but usually the potential is there where it's like, the full human spectrum of emotion and how we show up is allowed. And the more we can let that out, that actually really clears a lot of space for us to just move towards what we want and what we want to create without all the little games that we play around how we have things set up.
That's good. We can do a deeper dive on that because yeah, I don't think there's anybody who could honestly answer the question of, hey, start all over. How would you envision your life? I don't think anybody would honestly say exactly how it's going right now. There's always something, right? There's always some tension in a relationship or in a job or in a role that you're in, or maybe just some part of yourself that you don't really get to exercise or express just because all these other demands of life come first.
Yeah.
And so if nothing else, in our first conversation that we get to have here, I think that is like the perfect person to talk to someone like you, is that person that when they think about that question of what would life look like if it was in its most ideal form, or you answered that, or you posed that question much better than I did. But if even the idea of that question alone kind of raises some tension, raises some like kind of clench your jaw and get a little uncomfortable, just the idea of that question, that's probably a good place to start, is talking to Seth. So, Seth, we'll do this again. Thanks for jumping on. We're up against time, but excited for everything that you're doing in our community. Really happy to know you. Happy to have you here as a part of our community at the gym here as well. And let's do this again sometime very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I say a quick piece on that?
Please, absolutely.
I have experienced so much transformation in my body since I started working with you guys, probably like 8 months ago now, something like that.
Love it.
I'm just very fundamentally strong. I find myself like, I was hiking and there was this fallen tree, and I sort of, without thinking, put my hand down and vaulted right under it. And I sat there for a second, like, what just happened? But it's just a testament to how much the workouts here really are just strengthening me, and I feel excellent. So thanks, like you said about me, thanks for all that you give to the community. You're such a big presence, like a leader of entrepreneurs in Greenville, really like setting the stage, and you're involved in everything. So thanks for all that you do and give to people. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Seth. That's a great place to end. I really appreciate that. And we will do this again very soon. Thanks, man.
Looking forward to it.